Hi, Bon. Welcome to 10 Minute Talks. I'm Harshadeva.
Today, on 10 Minute Talks, I'm honored to speak with Stephen Cornish, Director General of the Geneva Operations Centre at Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, widely known as MSF. Stephen brings over decades of frontline humanitarian leadership, managing MSF operations in complex conflict settings such as Chechnya, Sierra Leone, Georgia, and Peru, and negotiating humanitarian access in some of the world's most challenging environments. At a time when humanitarian needs are growing, while humanitarian space is shrinking, Stephen shares important reflection on what the public often misunderstands about humanitarian work, how we can continue to contributing meaningfully in the face of overwhelming crisis, and what truly means to make a difference today.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining me today. My first question is, you have spent years leading humanitarian responses and explaining and defending humanitarian principle in challenging political environment. With today's overlapping crisis and shrinking humanitarian space, what do you think the public most misunderstands about humanitarian work?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. And in response to your question, I think that sometimes perhaps the general public might think that the problems that we're responding to are created by those who suffer, or that the situation itself, if it's a conflict or a war, it might be too difficult for them to separate into good and bad. But as humanitarians, we believe that everyone has the right to the basic building blocks of life, whether that's food, water, shelter, medicine, and safety. And that notion is rather universal. At MSF, we have 7 million supporters all around the world who share that same belief. And in fact, most cultures have their own codes, values, and religious traditions, which when we take a look at them, they also share a right for civilians to be spared from conflict, for the poor to be assisted. And as a result, when I was in Afghanistan during the conflict under the Taliban, we were able to negotiate with warlords to bring medicine, nutritional food, and vaccines into opposition areas, as the commanders themselves understood that the value of helping both sides, that deep down they recognized the right of children to be vaccinated, women to be given birth in safe conditions. And as a result, by doing that work on both sides, we can restore human dignity. We can accompany those in their hour of need. And in fact, most warlords, most religious traditions, most political figures can understand that value.
All right, Steve. My second question is, today we are facing overwhelming humanitarian crisis where suffering can feel constant and solution often seems out of reach. For humanitarian professions and others who feel overwhelmed with, what is one realistic way to keep contributing meaningfully?
Well, I understand the sentiment, but what keeps me going is the realization that 90% of those delivering humanitarian aid are professionals and volunteers from the countries themselves. Those people are also affected by the same conditions as those that we're seeking to assist. And whether that's in Gaza or Sudan, the backbone of humanitarian aid is, in fact, the people affected themselves. They come from the communities who are either in flight, are suffering malnutrition, or in conflict. And those people get up every day and come to work, knowing that they're playing a small part in reducing their community's suffering, of restoring their dignity, and of giving hope. And if they can do that, well, how can we in our luxury and security do anything less? For me to take action, to stay informed, you can donate, you can sit on a board, you can volunteer abroad, but you don't need to go around the world. In our communities, in our families, everywhere where we are, there are people that don't have the same ability as we are, that are suffering, that are having a bad time, and concentrating on relieving that suffering, whether at home or abroad, helps bring hope. Hope comes from action, and everyone can take a small step to improve the lives of others.
Thank you. Finally, is there a message or reflection you would like to share with the people who are trying to make a difference in humanitarian work, as well as with those listening today?
I will have to start with with the reality. It is true that after decades of making progress on malnutrition, on vaccination rates, on the state of well-being of the world's population, most of the global indicators are worsening, and many rapidly. The Millennium Development Goals are in retreat. Climate crisis is growing. So it can feel overwhelming at times. But as I said before, the answer to that is to take action, not to turn off or turn away or to become nihilistic. If we resist that urge and we take action in community, then we'll bring hope not only to ourselves, but to others. And action and hope in our world today can indeed still be part of the solution. In fact, they're the necessary beginning point of the solution. And I would urge your listeners, I would urge those involved, whether in community or in humanitarian aid, to continue bringing their grain of sand to that beach of possibility. And I believe in my heart we will all be better off for it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Boudica.